Magnus Carlsen takes on Yilmaz Mustafa, and as always, the opponent has to start the clock as Magnus is not on the board. Yilmaz plays the move d4, and he is a very strong GM playing on the top board for Turkey. Magnus is here, shakes hands. Yilmaz Mustafa's rating right now might be low, 2587, but at one point he was 2665. Magnus has had a good start at the Olympiad. He has been on 2 out of 2. But this one is an important one for him because the Turkish team is very strong, very talented. Yilmaz on board 1, Ediz Gurel, Yagis Khan, very strong team. Sanal Wahab. It's knight f6 by Magnus. c4 played by Yilmaz now. And Magnus responds with e6. Very solid, very steady. Knight comes out to f3. Always a pleasure to watch the world number 1 in action. And what is the opening choice that he's going to take? He plays his pawn to d5. And Yilmaz brings his knight out to c3. Many options here. c5 semi-Tarash, bishop e7, queen's gambit decline, bishop b4 Ragozin, d takes c4 Vienna, goes knight bd7. Also interesting move, leading to queen's gambit territory. Queen's gambit decline territory takes. And Magnus will take back. E takes d5. Takes it back. And now white can put the bishop on f4 or g5. Both are possibilities. He plays his bishop to g5. And Magnus plays his pawn to c6. Black has a very simple plan of developing the bishop and castling here e3. White wants to get his bishop out to d3. Queen c2, maybe then long castle or short castle, keeping the options open. Queen a5. Slightly unusual, but has been played before. The idea is to pin the knight and prepare knight e4, taking advantage of the pin and also hitting the bishop. Bishop d3 played by Yilmaz. But in a way, the knight e4 move will happen still nonetheless. And Magnus plays it. Now this is a very tricky move because if you take here, the knight is hanging and the queen attacks the bishop. So you have to be very careful. Yilmaz goes queen c2, but he has given up his bishop on g5. Knight takes g5. Magnus now has the bishop pair in the position. Knight takes. But overall, white's development is much better. So there is some compensation to losing the bishop pair here. And I think it's easier to play as white in this position. Knight comes back to f3. And now Magnus plays his bishop to d6, just bringing the bishop to a good square. It's very nice to see how Magnus brings all his pieces into the game. He has to figure out what to do about the bishop on c8. That is a problem. He can now castle, which is a normal move, but he first plays knight f6. The downside of this move is that white gets the e5 square for his knight. And I really like this next move by Yilmaz, rook a e1, because he's trying for the e4 break. Magnus castles, but now with the castling done, he's going to put his knight on e5 and then play f4, and the rook would be well placed defending or just protecting the e3 pawn. So knight e5 played. That's a good move. Now slowly and steadily white is trying to take over the center. A6 played by Magnus because he knows white is going to go f4 and he wants to meet it with c5, and then he doesn't want to worry about knight b5 jumps. So a6 is a very useful move. f4, cementing the knight in the center. The bishop here does not have any good squares to go to as of now. c5 played, striking the center. And now Yilmaz plays his queen to f2. Another possibility was just to tuck the king to the corner, but queen f2 is nice. Maybe wants to put his queen on h4 and then go g4, g5. With the bishop here, it can become dangerous. Magnus trying to create play on the queen side with b5. A plan could be to put the bishop on b7, push b4 and plonk the knight into the center of the board. Yilmaz goes back with bishop b1. And now will b4 be played? Magnus first goes bishop b7, just putting his bishop on this square and taking into control the e4 square. That's his idea. g4, let's go. White is trying to open up the king side with g4, g5, trying to attack the position. Magnus Carlsen now sits up in his chair. He knows the position is a bit dangerous. He comes back queen c7. It's a calm, cool move. And Yilmaz going to push another pawn on the king side, it seems. h4, he's going all out. But Magnus is calm here because knight e4 he has in the position. That's the reason why he had played b5, bishop b7, to put the knight right into the center of the board. And I think that stops the attack at least for some time. Pawn takes. And if only the bishop could pop out on this diagonal now, that would be great. g5 played by Yilmaz. The best move here is rook a d8 and black is doing completely fine. But Magnus makes a small error. He goes f6. And Yilmaz takes the pawn. G takes f6. And I think Magnus wants to take back with the pawn. Maybe rook takes is a better move. But taking with the pawn attacks the knight in the center. And now check is getting intense. If you go king h8, there is knight g6 check winning material. King h7 is met with queen g6. So he goes queen g7. Now the knight is hanging here. But d takes c5. Beautiful move. Because if you take here, there is knight d7. Maybe this is what Magnus has missed. dc5 is such a cool move. Magnus takes with the bishop now. And this is actually creating a very good position for Yilmaz. He's totally better now. The reason for that is that this king is a bit weak. And also this pawn on c5 is extremely strong. So Yilmaz now has a choice between taking the queen or the bishop. He takes the bishop. Pawn takes. Material is even. But now the Turkish GM can take the open file here. He can also trade. A lot of possibilities. He decides to first take. Rook f8. Magnus must take back with the rook. Both kings are exposed, but somehow the white bishop is just superior to the black one. If you can play bishop c2 to b3, oh, what a bishop that would be. Yilmaz now knows that he has a better position and plays rook d1. Very good move. Threatening rook d7 right here. Also rook d6, rook g6. Magnus has to play his best chess now. b4. I like this move. The reason being that in some lines like rook f3, rook d7, rook g3 takes, b4 would give white a very solid edge in the endgame. And so b4 is a very human decision by Magnus. Rook d6 played, but instead bishop c2 to b3 would have been a winning position here for Yilmaz, and it would have given him amazing chances to win. But now Magnus is back in the game. He's still worse, but he can keep fighting. Rook c8, and this pawn is not really hanging. So maybe h5, fixing this weakness, threatening then if you take the pawn, check and you win the bishop. So h5 would have been cool, but he goes rook b6. But now the bishop gets this beautiful square here on d5. And it's true that a6 and h6 both are hanging, but Magnus has enough counterplay now. His c5 is weak. If you take here on a6, there is rook c5. If you take here on h6, it's rook c1. The bishop is almost trapped. Takes on b4. The e4 pawn is attacked. Magnus chops off the pawn on c5. And bishop takes e4 played here. White is now a pawn up, but Magnus can go and snatch the pawn on a2. And he does it. Bishop takes a2. This bishop is not going to be trapped here. In the corner. And now rook a4. You have to be very careful here, because if you play bishop c4, I'll take and give you a check, and that is game over. So that's the reason why here bishop f7 was played by Magnus. And now Yilmaz can take a pawn here. Rook takes a6. He's a pawn up and should have some chances to press, but Magnus is so good at defending such positions. He goes rook b5, attacking the b2 pawn. Maybe it's not so easy to defend it anymore, so you have to go after the h6 pawn. And you can see Magnus gets up. He's more worried about other games now, that he has his own game under control. Yes, he's a pawn down, but it should be possible to defend this. Rook takes b2 check. And now the king can go up to f3. He goes king f3. King g7 is met with rook at 7 check. Magnus plays rook b4, keeping pressure on the bishop. And Magnus now knows that he can hold this. Bishop f5. There's still some chances with the h pawn, but it's all happening within very limited space on the board. King g7 played. And if the rook moves away, then you lose the h4 pawn. So check. King f6. The thing is, with Magnus, having an advantage is not really enough. Because the moment you have an advantage, Magnus quickly realizes that he's worse, and he tries to find the trickiest defense out there. And so being better against Magnus is generally means that you have to be playing even better, because he's trying to find the trickiest of defenses, and it's not easy there for many players, especially when Magnus is trying to find the best resources. Only the best players in the world are able to sort of compete with him there. And so beating Magnus is a lot about playing your top chess even when you get a winning position. Like in this game, Yilmaz could have won if he had found this bishop c2, bishop b3 maneuver. But then again, there were so many tempting options, and he went for rook d6, but it backfired because Magnus found the way to get activity. Rook d6. Check. King g3. slowly and steadily Magnus is getting active, and he's just limiting white's possibilities here. You have to be careful about one particular pattern here, which is that if you play this, I give you a check, not to go to h6, because then this is a checkmate. So this has to be carefully dealt with. But Magnus can now give a check here on f3, and that would be a good move. Check. And Yilmaz plays his king to g2 or not? Yes, king g2. The thing is that such endgames should be played on by the side that has an extra pawn, because in team tournaments such a position can give a lot of morale boost to your teammates. They can think, oh, there's no chance that Yilmaz is going to lose, maybe he will win, so let's just continue here. But now Magnus has found a way to force the draw, it seems, because it's kind of attacking this pawn here. Like after king h2, he just goes and attacks here. Oh, he first gives a check. King g1, and now he'll go back and attack the h4 pawn. And now there's no way to save the pawn, so Yilmaz gives a check. Maybe the only way to lose here is if you play bishop f7, because then h5 comes in, bishop e6 is a threat. So he plays king f6, check. King f7. And maybe you can go here, then rook takes h4 is fine. And bishop g6 check is met with king g7, rook h5, rook g4, and you win the bishop. So plays check, king f6, check. King f7. Magnus knows it's a draw. Check. And a draw is agreed there. A good game by Mustafa Yilmaz and a great hold by Magnus. I think the best move was b4 by Magnus. Just not letting white connect the pawns. It was a very good human decision, because he was losing after that move if Yilmaz found bishop c2, but in the end it was a draw.
So Mustafa, a big congratulations to you for the draw with Magnus. How was the game?
Thank you. It was a messy game from the middle game. It started like he pushed his pawns on the queen side, I pushed my pawns on the king side. I had very beautiful knight on e5, but he had bishop pair, so it was kind of risky from my side, but this is what position requires. So okay, I don't know which moment was the critical one, because after every single move we have like bunch of choices. So I mean, he could push maybe b4 c4, or he kept this tension on the c5 d4 pawns. He didn't change it. Maybe in some point he could have changed and played knight e4 or rook e8 and then knight e4. Like, I mean, really it's very difficult for me to say. I was just trying not to lose control and trying to push my pawns, because in some point I was almost pushing g5 after queen c7, which was a mistake, I guess. And so okay, then when he pushed f6, this point I understood that okay, now I'm not worse anymore. I'm going to be try. I mean, I'm not going to lose this game for sure, because after gf6 he took with the g pawn, but he could have played rook f6, then queen g2, cd4, knight e4, sorry, bishop e4 I had, because bishop e4, queen e4. Now I'm attacking the rook that's on a8, so he plays rook f8, ed4. I thought he would go for this position, then try to play rook f5, and you know my king is also weak, but okay, I'm pawn up, so I cannot be worse, so I should be a little bit better, but I don't know how big it is. But after gf6, queen g2, queen g7, I had like two options to play knight d7 or dc5. This knight d7, I think cd4, and he sacrifices exchange. This knight f8, let's say rook f8, ed4, and some f5, I don't know. Then queens will be chopped off, and then I cannot bring my king to e3, so I don't know. I mean, it's like clear exchange up, not against a pawn, but I don't know if I'm better or not, so I decided to go for the dc5 line. That's and we went to this end game. Like
Yeah, the end game you were a pawn up, and did it matter or?
no, actually it was like already a dead draw.
It
But
was a draw.
okay, I was trying, at least trying to put some pressure.
Yes, you
but
played till the very end and trying
okay,
to put.
my teammates are okay. They're suffering a bit, so I have to do my best. I'm pawn up. I mean, if I don't blunder like 2 days ago, I cannot lose the game. So, okay, maybe in this end game I had some chances, because when he pushed b4, I was expecting him to put some setup with king g7 and rook f7, rook f6, and once we change rooks, bishop comes to c6, and it's like fortress. This is what I was expecting from him. When he pushed b4, there I had some ideas as like a3 and b8, b4, or I mean I had so many options, rook d6, and I could also take on h6 maybe, then rook b. I'm not sure.
But you had very less time.
Yeah,
at
I
that
had
point of
very little
so you
time,
had
so I had to just
decide.
I thought in this end game I will get some pawn, but actually it was not enough. I mean, I mean, Magnus. I mean,
Yeah.
he played precisely. I guess I didn't understand. I mean,
And was it the first time you played with Magnus?
yeah, this was my dream actually on chess. So I wanted to cross 2650 and be in top 100, and it was last year I managed that. I had a very good period, and this was my second dream to play against Magnus. I was, chasing him in Norwegian league and everywhere, because okay, he's the greatest of all time. So I mean, what can I say? I mean, it was my dream.
Yeah, wow, how do you feel? Like yesterday when you saw the pairing and it was Norway and it was Magnus, like what was your emotion like?
Okay, I mean, first of all, I lost 2 games in a row, which I normally don't do that, but this year is a bit messy for me. So, okay, then my captain told me to rest the next day. So yesterday I was resting. So then I was expecting Norway, because we have the same colors and we can match up. And okay, it was like I asked Ediz that if you want to play with him. He said, okay, this is like always want to play against him, and you know this is your time. So then okay, it was clear that I'm going to play against him, but psychologically I was in a big pressure, because my tournament is not going well here, and this year like I lost 100 points of rating, so this is like incredible. So I didn't know what to do, just tried to relax and prepare my game as usual, and I tried not to be I tried to be calm at least.
Wow, that's amazing. And Ediz Gurel, yes, we saw him a few months ago. Just amazing talent. Also in your team, Yagiz, two youngsters. How is the team vibe like?
Okay, I love those kids, and they're amazing players. Like your Indian guys, like Mukesh, Prag, or Nihal. I don't know. They're very young. They're ambitious, working hard. And okay, in the near future they will, I think, cross 2700 and they will be like top players. But okay, we will see. At least I'm trying to be a good player that we can, fight for medal in those tournaments. I mean, this is very good generation. I never had such things in my life. I'm in the national team since 2008, and this is the first time that I'm feeling okay. We are having some chances for something at least, or maybe 2 years later it will happen. I don't know.
Wow, that is like, what number of Olympiad you're playing? This is your
my eighth one.
Eighth
this
Olympiad.
Pandemic time we couldn't play. This was online, so I
right.
don't count it. So
Wonderful. And are you enjoying Budapest? Are you like, okay, I know right now you're getting back, but maybe your dream coming true, playing with Magnus, this is your, boosting up energy, and we wish you all the best, and also to your team and the youngsters. We'll watch out for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.